Howdy, folks. I'm Drew Taylor. Welcome to the Daily Drew. This is episode 5 of the Daily Drew. I appreciate those of y'all that have tuned in and those of y'all that have subscribed, especially, this game is about subscribers, I'm learning. Today, folks, we are going to talk about the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And, what's interesting is that, most of my life, and when you're running hard and fast and everything ahead of you, I mean, it just seems to happen, and I've kind of lived a lot of my life that way. And I think a lot of it's by choice. When I get up every day, and I've talked about this before, when I get up every day, first thing I do is wake up and I ask God to help me climb the mountain I got to climb that day, because I always lay out a mountain for me to climb. Not everybody does that. And in my opinion, not everybody should do it, because it can end up being it's a bit of a struggle, but for the entrepreneur, and man, I'll have to look and see what the stats is on the number of people that are entrepreneurs, but for the entrepreneur, man, the getting out there, getting up early, the passion you have for the things you do. I have to tell you, I've been in a lot of businesses, radio, television, media, obviously, service business, franchised a couple of companies, manufacturing, it's crazy, the stuff I've done. But I have to tell you, Sherry and the boys and I did a 6-month option on a restaurant, and it was like one of the Brazilian barbecue types. No, it's one of the stir fry types. What do they call them? Not teppanyaki, but where you go and you make your own stir fry and they cook it. Anyway, we did that, and we took an option on that restaurant for 6 months because I wanted to try it out before we did it. Folks, toughest business on the planet. And the reason I'm telling you that is because people in the restaurant business, it is a discipline. You're only as good as your last few meals. And then it doesn't take many people to go in there. And as y'all know, everyone has a bad day at some point. But man, you can get in that restaurant, it's tough, man. So by the time we got close to the 6 months, I could not get out of there fast enough. And this was in the spin up because we'd bought that piece of property out there. Sherry and I we bought that piece of property in probably, I guess, 2006. And then we started building our Adobe Village, or what we called Sherdy's Oaks. And if you look at the bottom of today's notes and all that stuff, you'll see on there's a couple of links. You can see that thing, kind of what it was about and everything. But anyway, and so, running fast and hard, we opened it initially, Sherdy, as a trading post, and we called it Sherdy's Trading Post. Sherdy was a nickname that I gave Sherry within about 2 weeks of us meeting. And so when I told her one day, we had gone to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and you'll see some pictures of that. And I took pictures of stuff, and it was beautiful. And I was looking at that construction and everything else, and never really seen much about it. And so I went out and found a couple of people that were building Adobe homes out there in Santa Fe. Got to talking to them about how they do it. And then I met a guy in San Antonio. He was a bit of a shyster, but anyway, met him, and he'd done some Adobe stuff, and he showed me the stuff he'd done, and he assured me that he could do what I wanted done out there, and it was going to be for a bit of a song, and I was all happy about it, So anyway, we go out there and we start building this Adobe Village, and I mean, we were leased within 90 days of breaking ground. It was crazy, man. Everybody loved it, and this is early 2007. So I'm out there, and I mean, we're doing stuff. Sherry and I went out, and it was good news and bad news. Because we were out in the country, the only thing that I had to get permits for was septic and electrical. Okay. And so in the county, there's not much permitting, that is required out there. And it's good news, bad news. Responsible builders, which we were. I mean, we built a quality product. Responsible builders, you don't have a problem with that. But people that are, trying to cut corners, it can cause you problems down the road, because a lot of times they don't identify themselves till long after they're built, or you bought them, or whatever. But anyway, we were out there, and we were doing well with it. And so I'm knee deep in watching this project go up, and it's on Highway 281 North. And I mean, the traffic through there, and it was really a fun and exciting time. The link below here, it shows a bunch of everything from what the property looked like right as we started breaking ground to then the construction poured thousands of custom Adobe, hand-poured Adobe blocks on that property, and built all these things out of it. And then one of the things that you'll notice, and I know I'm talking a little bit more about this, but one of the things that you'll notice is that the on the chapel, By the time we'd finished everything, Sherry and I went out with a 100-foot tape measure and kind of laid out around these oak trees what we wanted this artisan village to look like. And she said, honey, if we're going to do this, the only thing you have to promise me is that you won't cut down any of my oak trees. And I said, I won't cut down of any of Sherdy's oaks. And I thought, Sherdy's oak, huh, that's what I'm going to call it. So we called it that. Now they call it the Adobe Village or something. After we lost it. But anyway, so it's running high and far. And then we were getting ready for our grand opening. We're wrapping up a bunch of the construction, and it still had some things that need to be done. But I mean, we're getting close. And in March 2008, we do this grand opening to a huge fanfare, and I mean, the place was packed. It was amazing, right? And then I set out. I had a hard money loan. If you don't know what that is, just be aware of what you're doing. It is a tool that is used all the time, especially for flipping homes and that kind of thing, construction projects. It's interim finance until you get permanent financing. So anyway, I had borrowed $1 million. We dumped all of our money into it, got a couple of small investors in it, and then we dumped everything we had. And then I borrowed $1 million hard money. And it was set to balloon June 30th, 2008. And I'd been out there, and 1st of June, I called the guy up and I said, hey, buddy, I'm going to file bankruptcy. Man, nobody's close to lending. And I was borrowing less than 25% on a $6.6 million valuation, and they wouldn't touch it. And all of a sudden, they're telling me that the economy has turned, and I was just ignorant. I was oblivious. I'd been so focused in my project. It's also really the only project that I didn't take equal investors in, almost everything I've ever done, because my logic behind that is that if you win, you toast champagne together, and if you lose, you have somebody to cry with. So anyway, I still believe in doing that to this day. But we'd gone in and got it, done the grand opening. And then I tell Randy I'm not gonna be able to do that. We meet for lunch middle of June. He said, man, Drew, he said, the economy's tanking. And I'm like, no kidding, man. I didn't have a clue. And he goes, yeah, we're pulling in. We're not lending anything else. He said, do you have anybody that looks like they'll do it? And I said, candidly, Randy, I said, I've got a group out of Dallas. The principals have been down here and a couple of times looked at it. They love it. They even see because of what it is and everything else. And we're supposed to close middle of August. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, let's extend this. I'll send you a little agreement. Let's extend this to September 30th on the note, with no paperwork, no nothing, just this agreement, on the agreement that if you can't get me my $1 million, there's $1,050,000 I owed him. If you can't get me my $1 million back, you won't file bankruptcy. So I'm in the closing, 1st of September, pushed back a couple of weeks. And most of y'all been in real estate closing. I'm in the closing, and I'll tell you the rest of this when I come back here in 2 minutes. All right, folks, welcome back to the Daily Drew. And I was talking about being in the closing to get my money finally for Sherdy's Oaks. Now, by the time we opened the door, about half of the folks had fallen out of their leases. Okay, but I still had enough that would pay the note and anything I needed to do. Okay, so I'm in the closing, and y'all done real estate transactions. I'd signed all my papers. They're shoving them across to their agent that was down here to close, their closing agent. And his phone, he had it face down like this, but it kept buzzing, vibrating on the table. And so when they shoved the papers over to him, I said, man, would you shut that phone off till we get this done? And I'm like 8 signatures away from getting my money, and the rest is history. And he turns his phone over and looks at it, and he goes, man, it's my office. I better check him. And he walks out, and he walks back in, and he goes, sorry, man, the deal's off. So on September 30th, 2008, I went and met Randy, and I handed him the keys and assigned him all the leases. And basically, I walked away and found myself with bust. I breezed through that pretty quick. It was quite a learning experience, So I had a buddy of mine, and I'm the guy that believes you can knock me down. I don't care how many times. I'm like Rudy. I've told y'all before, my favorite show is Rudy. You can knock me down. I don't care how many times I'm going to get back up and I'm going to do it again. So I have a buddy of mine tell me that the oldest steakhouse in Vegas, and it's world renowned, it's where all the entertainers went in the 50s and all the stuff. He said, they want to franchise it. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah. And I said, I can do that. I'd franchised a couple of companies. I fly out there for a discovery tour. I mean, this place it's renowned, still to this day is. And there are some pieces of this that I'm not going to go into about that whole scenario. They will be in my book at some point. I told you yesterday, I put out on LinkedIn, I said, folks, tune in. This is going to be my autobiography. And a whole lot of it is, because I'm telling you a lot about me. But anyway, so I fly out there and we look at this thing, and he's got a list of people that are interested in opening them high-end steakhouse in Chicago and New York and California and other places. And I'm thinking, man, this is a no-brainer, right? This is also in 2008. And so we didn't realize how bad it was going to get in 2008. We saw the Fontainebleau over there 90% complete, and the cranes quit moving after I'd been there about 6 months. But I mean, everything about that was crazy. So I go out there to franchise Golden Steakhouse, right? And it's amazing. I'm having the best of times. But I go in there, they'd been losing money for years, $2.5 million in sales. And they're losing about 250 grand. The bank account, Wells Fargo, was upside down $22,000 in the account. I mean, I'm looking at this whole operation. I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? Anyway, I get into that thing. I hire an operator who'd been in Hollywood, California for many years. He'd had a major heart attack. And so he'd had to sell his restaurants, and he was there in Vegas retiring in one of the Del Webb's, retirement communities, needed to make some money. I was introduced to him. His operations guy hired him to come in. We turned that place around, started making money, got with the state. State was owed over $250,000 in arrear sales tax, most they'd ever been owed by a business without closing it. Anyway, I mean, it was incredible. And so I put up cameras and stuff, and I found out that the guys in the kitchen, because they weren't making the money that they used to make. And the reason that Wells Fargo would leave that account open is because all the ACH ran through there. And when you're doing, $2.5 million a year in sales, that's a lot of money every week. They're not real worried about them getting their money back. But no purveyor would take payments. I mean, it was a mess. And then I put up cameras, and I found out about half the stuff, because food cost ended up being about 55%. And in a dinner house like this, high-end dinner house like this, even with prime and everything else, shouldn't be over 25%. And anyway, so I start watching. I see that happen. We get everything tightened up. We get that place running like a sewing machine. And at some point, I'll tell you, but I found out in the dark of night that place was still run by the mob out of Chicago. And so I go to the proprietor there in Vegas the next day, and I tell him, I said, listen, man, I'm out. I said, I'm just no simple country boy, and we can't franchise this with the background that it's got. And I'm not going to give you all the details that 100% confirmed what I found out one night when a guy comes into that place and says, this is who I am. And I'm like, yikes. So anyway, I go over to the proprietor's place and take my contract, my agreement, all the numbers and everything that we had. And bottom line, they owed me over $80,000. I've got all the paperwork to prove it, based on what we've done. And they've been paying me $5,000 a month. And then, but I was to get 25% of the franchise company, and then I was to get a percentage of the profits above what they'd done. In only 8 months, they owed me $80,000. That's how we'd turn that business around. Anyway, when I go in there and tell him, I said, man, I'm out of here. Operations, he'll stay with you. He needs the money. But man, you can't franchise this. And I said, so here's what we're doing. He agreed. I got him to come in. We stayed overnight, dug through all this stuff to find everything. He agreed that he could pay me $25,000 a month. $25,000, and then $5,000 a month till I got my 80 back. So I got a check for 25. Go over there. Bottom line is, he said, took me off the bank account and said, try to get the money. So I found myself with nothing to do, folks. What was so funny, what was so crazy about that time in Vegas, was that I look back at it now when it's kind of obvious to me, but God was positioning me to be where I am today. I've always lived an honest, righteous life, always. And we all have things that happen in our life, but I mean, I've never done anything that I'm morally there's decisions I made, there's people I've had invest with me, and things didn't work out quite like it did. I mentioned one of the things that I wrote. I carry in my wallet a list of folks, and I've paid a few of them, but there's more of them that I'll still get paid when the timing is right. And not that I have to, there's no obligation, but it's a personal thing to me. I'll be completely free. I got real free in 2025. 2026 and the rest of my life, man, I'm as free as the bird sitting in that tree right there. But anyway, so, I go out there, and all of a sudden that happens, and I'm like, man, what am I going to do? So I start looking for opportunities, because it's Vegas, baby. Anyway, I get in the entertainment industry out there, and I'm working with these folks in entertainment. And I mean, I helped produce the Iron Man 2 event at the Palms out there in Vegas, brought my kids out there, met with Stan Lee, kissed my wife on the lips. Stan Lee looks at her and he goes, "Damn, you're pretty." And he just leans in and kissed her on the lips. One of my kids has a picture of it somewhere. Anyway, I mean, it was just some of the craziest times out there. I had some of the best of times. Yet, and I never could have predicted where things were going to go. But anyway, so I get out of the steakhouse deal 8 months in, and I mean, there was nothing for me to come back to. Wife moves back in with her parents. Basically everyone that knew me just kind of disowned me. It's like, it's tough. I then began to look at the market and everything and see what the economy was doing and everything else. And I mean, it was just crazy. And when you look at it, when you look at some of the stats and stuff from what happened out there in Vegas, unemployment doubled this is 2008, late 2007, 2008. Unemployment doubled to 10%. 8.7 million jobs lost. GDP contracted over 4%. Home prices fell 30%. Real estate, baby. Stock market lost almost half its value. Hundreds of banks failed. Millions lost homes. I mean, this was 2008, which when I got through there and I'm like, man, I can't believe this happened to me. I didn't have a clue that it happened to a whole lot of people. So folks, when I get back in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you how I survived being homeless. All right, folks, I'm Drew Taylor. Welcome back to the Daily Drew. Now, let me tell you what I did and how I hacked. I love the fact that I find ways to do things. When I was out there in Vegas and I'm homeless, it took me a little while to figure out how to kind of do it, because what do you do when you don't have any money? And I was working, making money, but they'd given doctors. I had my wife titrated up on about $2,000 a month of morphine, methadone, hydrocodone, tramadol, and 7 other medications, private pay. And so everything I made, short of gas and something to eat, I'd send to my wife. And I lived in my car for about 6 months out there. But in doing that, I learned hacks. So I go to this volunteer. I did a lot of volunteering, had a church I was going to out there. I didn't want anybody to know my situation, right? So I'm going out there just as a patron. But I'd volunteer to all the things that we could volunteer to, because they always had food and drink. Then I ended up working at a food shelter. And at the food shelter, I'd work there twice a week. And I'm not kidding you, folks. I'm handing stuff across the table to people: supplies, shoes, socks, food, and all this stuff. Most of them had more than I did, because I saw them pull up. No car that I had that barely rode. At least that sucker was protection. And some of the things that you find out, when you're living out there in your car, some of the hacks. I found out you don't park on the street, because cops are going to come get you. You have to be careful of the parking lots that you're in. I found out that the best places, it was free in those days. Now they charge you. In those days, it was free to park in the casino parking lots. So I'd get in the casino parking lots, and I'd get it far back over in a dark corner as much as I could, and I'd put up a windshield thing, and I had clothes hanging on both sides, and I'd sleep in my car. And here's the craziest thing about it. Sherry had come out to Vegas with me, and when we found out, what happened with the steakhouse and all that, she went back to San Antonio, and for Thanksgiving to see her kids, and she called me and she goes, "I'm not coming back out there, man. Get this worked out for us or whatever." So anyway, I found myself out there, and I don't blame her. The smartest thing she did. And she ended up moving in with her folks. And that way she was stable, and everything was okay for the rest of the time until I got back on my feet. And anyway, so I figure out, and now I'm working at the food banks, and I'm doing volunteering at the churches and stuff. And I'm out there and I'm working. And then I realized that if I went to a hotel like a Best Western or a Hampton Inn or something like that, okay, because once a week I would save enough money, usually on Sunday nights, because it was the cheapest hotel night. It's Sunday nights, unless there's some event. Sunday nights, cheapest hotel nights in almost towns. People fly in on Monday, leave through Friday, tourists come in, Sunday's the night. So I could get a hotel out there for about $20, and I'd get a shower and a free breakfast and everything. Well, then I'd keep the key to that hotel, because if you go in for the breakfast, and you can call. Remember I said hunger makes a thief of any man? Yeah, I guess I was stealing breakfast. I actually talked to a few of the folks about it, and I said, how much? And just asking questions, because I always look good, I'd say, how much food do y'all end up throwing away out of this stuff? They go, oh, every day. So I didn't feel bad about it, But anyway, and I produced a television show on the Fox network out there called The Finest Dishes in Vegas. And it featured celebrities, chefs, and showgirls. Those are the dishes, right? Anyway, ran high and fast with that. I'm telling you, the highs were the highest, and the lows were the lowest. It was crazy. Then one night, when I'm living in my car, there was a banker out there that I'd met, and he ran a small privately owned bank. And he was an interesting guy, and he would come once a week, and he would meet me somewhere and buy me dinner. He'd usually pick me up, and I stayed in the industrial area, stay in industrial parks, or stay in the hotel. But I like to be away from the strip, and I was working out in other areas. Anyway, so he'd come pick me up and stuff. One night he'd pick me up, and I'd open an account with him when I did my cooking show. That's how I met him, and we just became buddies. And anyway, he picked me up one night. He was dropping me off about 11 o'clock at a convenience store down off Flamingo, far east by the airport. And in a 7-Eleven there, and all of a sudden he was dropping me off at my car. He would pick me up and take me around so that I didn't have to drive far and use gas. Anyway, and he'd usually, he'd slide me a $5 or $10 bill, $20 bill. I was rich. And anyway, a minivan pulls up. And guy rolls down his window, and I thought he wanted directions or something. And I walked around and said, "Yeah, buddy, where are you headed?" And he goes, "I need you guys to get in the van with me." And I said, "I'm not getting in the van with you." He had a buddy with him. And he shows me, and he's got peace on him. And he said, "Yeah, you're getting in the van with me." And he pushes a button, and the door slides open. And Kevin goes, "Hey, man, what's going on?" He had kind of a high voice. He did a lot of steroids. But anyway, "What's going on?" And I said, "They said we're going with them." He goes, "We're not going with them." And the guy goes, "Yeah, you're going." Anyway, they take us, and I get kidnapped. And bottom line is, guy takes me over to a place. He wanted me to do something that I was not going to do. This is God testing me. I didn't know it. But most of my life, I taught my kids when they were young. I said, "Guys, let me tell you something. If you're in a grocery store and the clerk gives you give them $20 bill and they owe you 10 back and they give you 20 back, it's not a bonus. It's a test." So I'm out there and I'm figuring God's testing me. But here's the thing, folks. I had $500,000 life insurance still intact. Okay, and it's costing me $57 a month. And is one thing we made sure got paid. So now I get kidnapped. This guy's trying to get me to do something that really shouldn't be done. And I told him no. And he goes, and some of y'all may have heard this in one of my other recordings. He goes, "Don't you live in your car?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I have you $1 million in 30 days. And I said, "No." And he ended up letting me go. Okay. I was actually kind of thanking God, thinking that he was going to take me out and my life insurance and take care of my wife and kids. That was my highest and best use in my mind. Not in his mind, not his plan. Anyway, so I had that go on out there. And the other thing that I'd do, I'd watch the papers and stuff to watch what shows were coming in town. And so whether it was concerts or fights or whatever it was, and then I would go and show up to the venue at 6 o'clock in the morning, because that's when all the help would get there. And of course, they just took any help that came in there. They weren't checking credentials or anything. I hung around there and I'd get to know the people that are in charge and everything else. And I'd go talking to them, and they just assumed I was one of the. And I can't tell you, all but 2 times, and I probably did this 15 different times, all but 2 times. They would come and say, "Hey, where are your credentials?" I say, "Oh man, I didn't get them. I was grabbing, and they'd get me my stuff." But the other thing I did that I found out about the Hamptons is that I would go in and park in those hotels at night. And then about 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd go and I'd throw my stuff over to get into where the pool was and the jacuzzi. Typically, I always stayed in one with jacuzzi. I'd bathe, shave, wash clothes that I needed to, sleep in my car there. Next morning, I'd go have breakfast. And folks, I survived for a few years. I did get run out by Marriott Residence Inn one day, and I'd actually talked to one of the gals there and said, "How was it?" But anyway, so, I like to leave lessons. What are the lessons? Okay. What those years taught me is that God's going to let you lose what you idolize so that you'll keep what matters. When I got rid of that diamond bezel presidential Rolex, I've never yearned for another one. Character matters more than credentials. Not every shiny thing is favor. And sometimes the education you didn't ask for becomes the wisdom you didn't know you were going to need. So, folks, I appreciate y'all tuning in. And if you find yourself in a hard time, stripped down, humbling, confused season, don't assume you're being punished. You might be in the middle of your education. Ask God, why are you bringing me here? That's what happened with me taking Larry to Arizona treasure hunting. Keep your integrity, guard your spirit, don't make mistakes, survival mistakes that result in failure. Okay, sometimes just survival is the victory. And if you're on the top of the mountain right now, stay humble. I'm telling you, folks, 2008 humbled a lot of people that can turn on a dime. And the only thing that travels with you is character, integrity, honesty, who you are right here. God bless y'all, folks. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow on the Daily Drew.